أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أاتخذوا من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم انفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة ما ينظرون إلا صيحة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون الفاتحة
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها
عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا
وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا
وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها
عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيه
عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيه
عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا
وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيه عند الله يا وجيه الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيه اشفع لنا عند الله حاجات يا ساداتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي اليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين
صلو علی النبی. اٹھا کوئی جنازہ پھر فاطمہ کے گھر سے، دنیا تڑپ رہی ہے فریاد کی اثر سے. کیا زہر تھا کہ چیرا یوں سینہ حسن کو، کٹ کٹ کے گر رہے تھے ٹکڑے دل و جگر سے. اہل حرم نے جانا بچے نے جان دے دی، گش کر گئے تھے قاسم لپٹے ہوئے پدر سے. بعد رسول ایسا دشمن ہوا زمانہ، زہرا کے لاڈلے کی میات پہ تیر بر سے. قبر رسول تڑپی تھرا گیا مدینہ، آنسو لہو کے ٹپکے زہرا کے چشموں تر سے. کیا انقلاب آیا سبت نبی کا لاشا، پہلو مصطفیٰ میں 2 گز زمین کو تر سے. تابوت سے لپٹ کر شبیر ایسے تڑپے جیسے ابھی اڑا ہے سایہ علی کا سر سے. اٹھا کوئی جنازہ پھر فاطمہ کے گھر سے. صلو علی النبی. پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. بائی حسن بائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خواستتاً، بائی حسن بائی حسن کہتی تھی زینب خواستتاً، بائی حسن بائی حسن دیکھو میرا رنجو مہن، بائی حسن بائی حسن. سب جان کھوتے ہیں اٹھو شبیر روتے ہیں اٹھو، ہے جاں بلب غم سے بہن، بائی حسن بھائی حسن. خوبی ہے یہ تقدیر کی رونے کو میں جیتی رہی. خوبی ہے یہ تقدیر کی رونے کو میں جیتی رہی. سوتے ہو تم پہنے کفن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن. زہرا کی گودی کے پلی مرکات میں سونے کو چلی. زہرا کی گودی کے پلی مرکات میں سونے کو چلے. اے مصطفیٰ کے جان و تن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن. کیسا وہ قاتل زہر تھا کیسا غضب یہ ہو گیا. کیسا وہ قاتل زہر تھا کیسا غضب یہ ہو گیا. نیلا ہے سب گلسا بدن بھائی حسن بھائی حسن. دیکھو ذرا قاسم کا سن اس کے یتیمی کے ہے دن. دیکھو ذرا قاسم کا سن اس کے یتیمی کے ہے دن. روتے ہیں بھائی خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن. کہتی تھی زینب خاصتاً بھائی حسن بھائی حسن. پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
Let's all recite 5 times I am Mujibal for all those in need here and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات صل على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat is condolences to Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for the master of our time, Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب إمام الحسن عليه السلام. May Allah increase in our reward for the commemoration of the difficulties of our master, Imam al-Mujtaba, Imam Hasan ibn Ali alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah in the Quran describes in Surah Ali Imran, verse number 26, that Allah is the one who grants honor to whom He chooses and removes honor or disgraces the one whom He chooses. Ibn Abbas, one of the famous both mufassirin, mu'arrikhin, knowledgeable people of his time, when he was asked, when did the downfall, when did this light that was presented by Rasulullah in Arabia become a state of disgrace? He says, I place this event at the downfall, at the start of the downfall, at the beginning of the disgrace of the Arab, at the killing of Hasan ibn Ali. This inflection point coming from, for example, a mu'arrikh, a mufassir of Quran, an alim of the Arab, is an interesting point of inflection, and it's proven to some extent by even the statements of our master, Imam Hasan ibn Ali al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala. When our second Imam began his imamat, famously in the first 6 months was his khilafat, that at the end of his 6 months he makes a peace treaty with Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. Now, some people say this was the end of the khilafat of Imam Hasan. Yes, it may have been end of a temporal rulership of Imam Hasan, but the imamat of an imam is not something that's dictated by the affairs of the people. An imam is an imam from Allah, not from the people. So, this event of a khilafat being taken from an imam in no way reduces his authority and his status. However, there have always been those amongst the people who never understood this concept of where the authority of the imam comes from. Even when they say they love the imam, and even us, when we say we love the imam, there's always the danger that we may not understand the mansab of imamat, the position of imamat, the honor and the dignity of imamat. And such was the case with Imam Hasan. That Imam Hasan, when he abdicated this khilafat, the people did not understand this, and they used to come to him and say, Assalamu alayka ya mudhill al-mu'minin. Salam to you, O disgrace of the believers. The one who has disgraced the believers. And Imam Hasan would reply, Lastu mudhill al-mu'minin bal mu'izz al-mu'minin. I am not the one who has disgraced the believers. Rather, I am the one who has raised their dignity and their honor. And the Imam did not make this statement once. As a matter of fact, he made it multiple times. That many people would come to him, and this was their way of showing their unhappiness or displeasure with the decisions of Imam Hasan. And they did so by trying to criticize his character. But the Imam never punished any of them. The Imam never abused any of them. The Imam would tell them, come and sit with me, and then educate them about the impact and the responsibility the Imam possessed. And he would guide them. But the one thing he would repeat in every situation is he would, after correcting them, لَسْتُ مُضِلَّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بَلْ مُعِزَّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. I am not the one who disgraced the believers. Rather, I am the one who has honored and raised the status of the mu'min. This idea of why the Imam repeats this statement and why he is the one who has honored the mu'mineen is an interesting historical analysis. To take a look and see that what is it that existed at the time that the Imam is insisting in educating the people that I am the one who has honored you and I am the one who has preserved you. So we want to take a look and we want to see very briefly, if you guys are with me, we're okay? All right. How did Imam Hasan honor and raise the status of believers in his 10 years of imamate? And why was it that he was the one who was protecting them from disgrace? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. To understand the impact and the reality of Imam Hasan, we have to look at him in light of the time that he existed. There is a very interesting point that says that an Imam resolves the conflict of the time to protect the mu'mineen. That whatever the condition that exists at the time is what the Imam's responsibility is, to the extent where they even make the statement that if Imam Hasan had been alive at the time of the Waqi' of Karbala, he would have been the one who stood against the army. There's no doubt about this, that an Imam protects the religion of Islam, does not reflect his own personal affairs in his responsibility. Imam's job is that Islam should persist, and however that's done. Now, before we even begin this conversation, there's a point, the 7th of Safar, the 28th of Safar. Amongst the mu'mineen, there's some question about which date is the one that we commemorate for the Shahadat of this Imam. Similar, for example, questions come up about many of the A'immah alayhimus salam of the day of their Shahadat, the day of their Wiladat. There are many things that become questionable. One of the analyses in history that looking at this, when analyzing this and looking for the answer, what's the correct date? One of the mu'arrakhin, he makes a statement. He says there is only one date that is ever written correctly. And he says that is the date that is written in blood. As many of our A'immah alayhimus salam were martyred by poisons, many of them were subject to abuses that were hidden from the people, makhfi from the people, the date became lost to us. But those events in history that are written in blood, meaning that with them is associated, for example, the outright killing of a person, with the outright abuse of an individual, with the outright shahadat in public, are the dates that are written in blood, and they are not forgotten in history. Which is why you'll never find a conversation or a debate that discusses and says, was the shahadat of Imam Hussein, maybe 10th of Muharram, maybe, I don't know. No, because of the fact that it was written in blood. Shahadat of Imam Ali alayhi salam. There's no doubt. We know the exact date. No Muslim debates this fact. When it comes to these dates that, for example, where there's some debate, there's some distinction, some difference, there's no priority given to necessarily to say that this is a wrong date and this is something bad that you're doing and that this is the right date, and if you don't do this, no. The idea that cultures have adapted different dates to build a wasila to a ma'soom, there's no problem with it. Which is why, if we commemorate it now, other communities commemorate it on the 28th, there's no problem with it. And that to resolve this debate, there is no way for us to go back and to figure this out, because nothing is proven or nothing is firm except for those dates that are associated with, for example, the shahadat of an imam by the spilling of his blood. Now, looking at the context of time in which Imam Hasan was present, there are three conditions that were present at the time of Imam Hasan that speak to us of the difficulty that the Imam began his imamate in. The first is the lack of security in the lands of Muslimin for anyone. Now, if you remember, Imam Hasan begins his imamate after the shahadat of Imam Ali, after the Battle of Siffin. Meaning that during the end of the life of Imam Ali was a strong conflict existing between the people of Sham, who were under the governorship of Mal'un Muawiyah, and those nations and those areas that were under the authority of Imam Ali. What had happened was that for a common Muslim during this time, it was not safe for you to move from one town or one city-state to another. Why? Because Muawiyah, while he had his governorship, had to figure out a way to establish the financial means by which he would be able to then overthrow an existing government. Now, one is to do trade with opposite lands in other areas, but that may, for some senses, give him some level of strength. But his enemy, the one who is running the state, the lands that are under the authority of Imam Ali, also gain in strength. Muawiyah's philosophy was that I need to gain strength, Ali ibn Abi Talib needs to lose strength. I send my armies on skirmishes into the Muslim lands, into those areas that are under the authority of Ali ibn Abi Talib, so that his people don't want to follow him because he doesn't give them enough security. And my armies are satisfied and satiated and rich so that they are happy to fight for me. So the first thing that Muawiyah had done is that, yes, the Battle of Siffin was the open and public battle, but short of that battle, what was happening in all of the areas that were under the authority of Imam Ali, whether we looked at parts of Yemen, whether we took at parts of Iraq, whether we took a look at parts of the northern areas and provinces, each of them was facing skirmishes and attacks from the armies of Ibn Abi Sufyan. And these were wandering around in the cities and on the streets and looking to pillage and to remove safety, such that there was no safety for anyone in the lands of Muslimin, that if you left your town, you were going to reach your destination or that you would be able to come back. The second was that this condition was even worse for the mu'mineen. That for the mu'mineen, it wasn't just a danger that if you left your town, but rather it was a danger whether you would live in your own town or if you would be able to survive as well too. What would happen is that these individuals would then go and look for the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. An example of this is given to of a person by the name of Bisr ibn Arta. Bisr ibn Arta was one of the generals of Muawiyah. Muawiyah sent him to go and to come to the city of Medina. Where he went, he destroyed houses and created strife and difficulty. Why? Because Ali ibn Abi Talib was no longer in the city of Medina. He had moved his capital to the city of Kufa. So it was a free land that he could raid, and the governor, the leader of the Khalifa of the time, wasn't able to have a strong presence there. So Bisr ibn Arta, after he attacks the city, he moves further down to Yemen, where he finds the two sons of Ubaydullah ibn Abbas. Ubaydullah ibn Abbas, Abbas being the uncle of the Holy Prophet, Ubaydullah his son, who was one of the companions of the Ahlul Bayt, lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, where he finds two of the children of Ubaydullah ibn Abbas and he kills them. And then he proceeds into the areas of Yemen that were giving sanctity to the lovers of Ahlul Bayt and continues to kill and pillage throughout this area. And this was the philosophy, that not only should the supporters of Ali ibn Abi Talib lose financially, but if we can find mu'mineen amongst them, remove them as well. So that the support of Ali ibn Abi Talib and those of his followers gets undercut from them. So Muawiyah removed the security and the safety from the people in such a way that if you were a Muslim, you were in danger, and if you were a mu'min, you were constantly in fear of your life. And there were others as well who did this too. There was Sufyan ibn Auf al-Azdi. Sufyan ibn Auf al-Azdi was given an army of 6,000 men and sent to the area above the city of Baghdad. And he was sent on the mission that he would go to this area and help to conquer and spread the borders of Islam. But when he got there, he decided there's nothing here for me. So he turned and he headed south to Anbar. Anbar was one of the provinces that loved Imam Ali alayhi salam. Famously in Anbar, one of the greatest killings that happened in that area was by this person who was sent by Muawiyah, who went and he set the establishment of not just killing the men, but also of the women and of the children and the destroying of the entire area. The principle was that the idea that Muslimin and khususan mu'mineen were being attacked in this time of Imam Hasan was not something that was a one-off exception, but instead a norm that was being established. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. From this side, we saw that Muawiyah had destroyed the entire structure of security within the Muslim empire. His other piece of attack that he presented was an attack against the religion itself. His attack against the religion itself was the first thing that he did was he tried to destroy the sunnah of our Prophet. That the sunnah should no longer stand anymore, that the sunnah should no longer be applicable, that people don't look to the example of Rasulullah, rather they turn away from it entirely and hasbuna al-kitab. Now we know that the Ahl Sunnah say that the book and the Sunnah are sufficient for us, but Muawiyah made his first attempt to make it that only kitab, you don't need anything else. Which caused the second issue that came up in religion was the introduction of bid'ah. Bid'ah refers to those ideas that are outside of Islam coming into Islam, and those ideas that are part of Islam being thrown out from Islam. And that this concept became something that, for example, come up with anything that you like. For example, the time in which Hayya ala khair al-amal was taken out of the adhan is in this time period. That it was promoted in this aspect. The starting of the praying of nawafil in the masajid and the practices happening in the masjid that had nothing to do with Islam, and that people praying in Jamaat what didn't need to be prayed in Jamaat, all were being promoted in this aspect to the extent where our master Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he says, I have seen such ideas present that you have left the tradition of the Prophet so far behind that if I was to try and force you to come back to it by force, I would find those same men who are fighting in my army trying to spill my own blood. So meaning that religiously, even the concepts of religion had become mushawwish, they had become mixed. There was no idea of what was truly the message of the Prophet and what was something that someone came up with and decided, hey, let's do this. This is the condition that Imam Ali spent 5 years trying to correct and create peace in society and re-establish the religion of the Prophet when he was killed, and the imamate comes to Imam Hasan alayhi salam. In this condition, we see that the idea of both the religion coming apart and of security and peace and the life and the blood of mu'mineen to be completely something that has no value in society anymore. And this is where the efforts of Imam Hasan alayhi salam begin to come and try and repair all of these issues and to bring back the honor and the dignity and the respect of both Islam and especially the mu'mineen. There are 4 points we'll mention with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. 1. The first condition when Imam Hasan decides to make a treaty with Muawiyah Mal'un, the first condition he sets the condition, he says that you will rule according to the Quran and Sunnah and nothing else. This establishment of this principle brought back the importance of the Sunnah in the eyes of the people and the sources of governance. That where Muawiyah had been trying to limit the way that Islam was interpreted to only the Quran and then others' opinions or ideas or sources from the companions, which we see. For example, the idea that exists in earlier Ahl Sunnah Islam is the concept that the companions of the Prophet also had ijtihad and a right to determine and establish the rules of Islam. This fundamental of bringing the prominence back of the Sunnah is one of the 2 sources of Islamic law, was one of the ways in which this opinion of others was restricted and limited, because the question came back when they presented their opinion, then what's the value? How does this come back from the Sunnah? And in this way, Imam Hasan begins the process of limiting and turning this entire nation, not just us, but the entire nation back to both the Quran and Sunnah, rather than Quran and Ra'i and opinion. And Imam Hasan's first principle is one of the most direct and responsible principles that's out there to ensure that the religion is reinstated to its fundamentals, then at least that people turn back and ask the question, what did the Prophet do, as opposed to what do I think we should do? The second thing Imam Hasan does is insists on the aman of the people. That, O Muslimin, you should have security in any land, and Muawiyah, you are forbidden from attacking any of the lands of the Muslimin, and that you have no right to raise and raid any land that commits itself and is entitled to the rights of the world of the Muslimin. Now Imam Hasan is starting the process that, O Muawiyah, you were raising funds for your people and pleasing them by killing the Muslimin. I forbid you, if you want to be one who has authority over the Muslimin, to be able to raise a sword against another Muslim. And then Imam Hasan goes further. He says, in my third condition of this treaty, I impose upon you the responsibility that none of the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib can be attacked or abused. And you have no right to bring anything against them and to cause them harm. This was so important that we see in history there are events. Muawiyah had made a man his brother, if you remember, Ziyad. Ziyad ibn Abi or Ziyad ibn Marjan. Ziyad, Mal'un, was an enemy of the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, and his son is Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ziyad was one who took pleasure in abusing the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Ziyad committed many atrocities, and we'll mention some of them. But what did Muawiyah do? Ziyad was an illegitimate child. Marjana was, na'uzubillah, an impious woman who, when her child was born, didn't know who the father was. Muawiyah, when looking for support, says, this Ziyad is my brother. He raises against his own father. He says, my father was one who visited women and had illegitimate children, and this is the illegitimate child of my father. This is my brother. And he insisted upon it, which is why till today he's known as Ziyad ibn Abi. That whoever his father was, he's the son of his father. That's it. This Ziyad wanted to and continued to persecute the Muslimin to such an extent that he would actually summon them because he was in authority from Muawiyah. One of the Mu'mineen brings a letter that he has received from Ziyad and comes to Imam Hasan and says, Ziyad has commanded me to entertain him and to go to him. Imam Hasan writes a letter to Ziyad and says, Ziyad, I have seen that you have demanded for this person to come. His blood is protected. He is one of our followers and it is forbidden for you to do any harm to him. So you better not be calling him except for khair. Ziyad replies. He says, this is a fasiq, son of a fasiq. This is a disbeliever, a sinner, son of a disbeliever who follows you. And I would kill him even if he hid between your skin and your flesh. And there would be nothing better for me than to kill you and to kill your flesh. Imam Hasan takes this letter from Ziyad. This is tariq. This is not something of my opinion. Takes this letter and writes to Muawiyah and says, this is what has been sent to me by Ziyad, and this is unacceptable per the conditions of your treaty. Muawiyah in turn sends this letter to Ziyad and says that this is, do not harm and do not bring issue to the Shia of Hasan. And you have no permission and no right to attack the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Remove your hand from them. The mention of this letter and why this condition exists is to show the actual impact of the efforts of Imam Hasan of preserving and protecting the lives of the mu'mineen. And that the mu'mineen gained the honor of being acknowledged as a part of society, and their blood was protected, and they had some level of safety because of the efforts of Imam Hasan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. These ideas give us the concept of showing us that when Imam Hasan says, I am the one who honored the believers, how did he honor the believers? By restoring them and giving them a position in society that had been attempted to be removed from them. That the Imam goes through this process of restructuring and forcing Muawiyah into the process of accepting this. Now, how do we know that Muawiyah even accepted these conditions? First off, Muawiyah, upon accepting the Khilafat, enters into Masjid Kufa and says that anything that I have signed with Hasan ibn Ali is under my feet, has no value. It's very true he makes this statement. It's very true. He publicly announces in a show of power to say that absolute authority lies with me and nothing lies with Hasan ibn Ali. And whatever he has put in on a condition on me is not true and valid. But when we look at the pages of history, we see something interesting that happens. First off, the Imamat of Imam Hasan, in all of history, starts in year 40, and 41 he abdicates. In 41, when he abdicates, his life lasts, and he becomes shaheed in either 49, 50, or most popularly, as we know, the year 51 after Hijrah. That Imam Hasan's Imamat lasts for a period of 10 years. The end of this 10 years is where we start to see changes in the world of Islam. And there are a number of changes that happen after this. The first of them is that Muawiyah in the year 54, after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, the year 44, during the life of Imam Hasan, makes his first visit to the city of Medina. And if you remember, Muawiyah Mal'un took power by seeking the vengeance of the blood of Uthman. So when he comes to the city of Medina, He says, this was my cousin, they killed him, I sought vengeance for him. He stays in the house of Uthman. When he stays in the house of Uthman, there's a famous discussion that happens between Muawiyah and the daughter of Uthman, who is also known as Aisha bint Uthman. Aisha starts talking to Muawiyah about the power of Imam Hasan and the influence that he's having and all of the rights that he has and what's going on, and tries to get Muawiyah to squash Imam Hasan and the Ahlul Bayt in the city of Medina. Muawiyah in the year 44, meaning 3 years after he's made the treaty with Imam Hasan, makes an interesting statement sitting in the city of Medina. He says, now that this treaty has been made, if we violate it, they will violate it, meaning Imam Hasan will violate it. And if he violates it, I don't know who will wind up on the throne and who will wind up under the throne. The significance of this statement points to the fact that though Muawiyah had taken the Khilafat and said, I put no value in the words of Hasan ibn Ali, he was also someone who was afraid of the authority that Imam Hasan could raise against Muawiyah. Remember something, Muawiyah didn't make many friends. He was an oppressor. He abused people. And Imam Hasan was someone who was a righteous individual who supported people, and people were drawn to him of his akhlaq and his presence. One of the greatest powers that Imam Hasan alayhi salam had was that he possessed the presence and the haiba of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the time of the Shahadat of our Holy Prophet, Sayyidah Zahra comes with Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein, says, these are your sons, give them inheritance from you. And to Imam Hasan is given the generosity and the presence, the haiba of Rasulullah. Meaning that he was someone who in his presence, you were overwhelmed by this presence the way you were overwhelmed by the presence of our Prophet. You felt the amazing power of this person that your tongue would stop working when you looked at him. You wanted to be around him. You wanted to be in his company. You wanted him to look at you with favor. Muawiyah knows this. And he knows that I'm an oppressor and that my authority rises from oppression. So it's true, he makes the public statement that yes, nothing I have signed with Hasan ibn Ali has any value. But on the other hand, he's saying that if I violate this treaty, I'm afraid of what Hasan can do to me. I'm afraid that the people will collect behind him and topple me. I'm afraid that the reality of how I've come to this power will be exposed. And Muawiyah is afraid of the authority of Imam Hasan. Therefore, yes, in history it says that he immediately violated and did not care about this treaty, but the impact of the presence of Imam Hasan and the fear that Muawiyah had shows in the letter that we see from Zayd ibn Abi Mal'un, as well as the other actions of the protection and the sanctity and security that existed in the religion of Islam, as well as that we see after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, 5 things that this man does that shows that now there is no consideration for the religion of Islam. The first of these things, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the year 51, when Imam Hasan becomes Shaheed, this is where the downfall of Islam begins, and there are 5 things that Muawiyah does to promote this. The first is the practice of the sunnah and preserving the sunnah that he had allowed or that was happening in the life of Imam Hasan stops. And a new ban is placed that if you are found narrating the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, if you are found narrating those true hadith from Imam Ali, from Sayyidah Zahra, from Imam Hasan, from these people who were the actual attachment of the Holy Prophet, your life was now potential for forfeit. And this begins in the year after 51. So, the second thing that happens is that security that was granted to the people is removed. The shackles on Zayd are removed. Zayd is then given the governorship of Kufa and Basra. And he begins the process of killing and hacking the Muslimin. If nothing else, one of the things that Zayd does is he forces 50,000 people who lived in Kufa, 50,000 people who lived in Kufa, to migrate to the city of Khurasan because of their loyalty that they held to Imam Ali alayhi salam. And this happens after the death of Mughira ibn Shu'bah. And Mughira ibn Shu'bah dies in the year 51. So meaning after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, whether Imam Hasan was Shaheed in 49, 50 or 51. In 51, we know that Imam is Shaheed. And in 51, when this person, this governor dies, Mughira ibn Shu'bah, He's replaced by Ziyad ibn Abi. And Ziyad begins the process of the persecution of the people, of the followers of Ahlul Bayt. There are even narrations that talk about that when he became the governor of Kufa, that at one point in time, as he was speaking, someone threw a piece of rotten fruit at him. There were maybe 5,000 people present. He locked and said, "Who was it?" When no one would answer, he cut one of the hands of every person who was in that masjid. Ziyad was a butcher, and he was set free after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, that he could do whatever he wanted. The third point that we mentioned is the killings of the lovers of Imam Ali alayhi salam. When we hear about the death of Hujr ibn Adi, Hujr ibn Adi was one of the fervent and ardent believers and lovers of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And his family was too. And he's sent from the city of Kufa to Sham because they can't deal with him in Kufa. And in Sham, Muawiyah is the one who is responsible for having him killed, and his grave we know is today is in Sham. And the conversation happens when Hujr ibn Adi goes. He goes with his son and his companions. And when they say, "Oh Hujr, as an honor to you, we'll kill your son first and then we'll kill you. Or we'll kill you first and kill your son afterwards so you don't have to see him killed." Hujr turns and says, "No, kill my son first." They say, "Huh? Hujr, we were honoring you, that you should not have to see your son be killed." Hujr says, "I fear that my child seeing me killed may turn and curse against Ali ibn Abi Talib. I would rather see my line finished than have one of my children curse Ali ibn Abi Talib." This was Hujr ibn Adi. There were others as well too. For example, Amr ibn Khazai, who was the first man in the religion of Islam for his love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, whose head was cut off and paraded through the cities. And his wife was imprisoned for the work and love of Ahlul Bayt that Amr ibn Khazai had. All of this happens after the year 51. That after the year 51, after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, the process of the persecution of the Shia, khusus and the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, begins in full swing. And that there's nothing there to stop them. And that's where the fourth point begins, is the cursing of Imam Ali from the pulpit. The cursing of Imam Ali from the pulpit begins after the death of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas in the year 51 after Hijrah. That Muawiyah prior to this did not have the gall, didn't have the ability that from the pulpits that there should be anyone who curses Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yet after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan, he begins this process of going out and disrupting and announcing the cursing of Imam Ali. The fifth thing that he does is he turns this khilafat from a khilafat into a pure kingship. That you see, up until this point in time, the people had some opinion about who should be in the position of authority. The khilafat belonged to the Muslimin. Muawiyah's idda'a, his claim when he wanted this position, was that the people have chosen me because I am the true successor to Uthman. I am the one who will seek the vengeance for his blood. I am the one who will represent this true religion of Islam. And he used to claim, you can't go to Ali ibn Abi Talib because he is the one who killed the previous Khalifa. Then how could you make the leader over you one who is responsible for killing the previous? But you see, when his life comes to an end, when this phase ends and Imam Hasan has now left, he now moves his position that this khilafat has no position for the people's opinion anymore. This is my kingdom. This is my authority. And I am the one who is in this authority. And I am the one who will choose the next one, and this is how this kingdom will continue. These changes that he brought demonstrate and show to us how it is that Imam Hasan makes the statement, I am not the disgrace of the mu'mineen, but I am rather the one who honored the mu'mineen. That the preservation of life and the efforts of Imam Hasan in his life were those that were necessary at the time, that had that not happened, there would have been no honor left in Islam and no safety and no Islam truly left. Which is why after the Shahadat of Imam Hasan alayhi salam raises the cry, Hayhat min al-dhillah. We are far from disgrace. The disgrace begins after the killing of Imam Hasan. This Imam al-Mujtaba preserved the religion of Islam and brought it back from the brink of destruction. He tied the hands of the oppressors and protected the believers, which is why that he had to be killed by the oppressor. The poison given to Imam Hasan was specially brought from Rome and was considered one of the worst poisons that could be given to a human being. Do you know why? Listen to the statement of Imam Hasan after he is poisoned. In one narration it says, after Imam Hasan is poisoned, he is sitting with Imam Hasan and Hazrat Abbas, and he begins to cough, and as he coughs, he runs out of the room and out of the house. When he runs out coughing, Imam Hussein and Hazrat Abbas follow him. They find the Imam outside, poking at his liver on the floor, saying to his brothers, I swear to you, I have been poisoned before, but I have never been poisoned by such a vile poison as this one. They describe something, if you have the patience to bear, that the day Imam Hasan was poisoned by his wife Ju'da Mal'una, that he had been fasting that day, and it had been a day in the heat, it had been a day of difficulty, it had been a day in which it was a hard fast to perform, and at the end of his fast, when he returned home, this wife of his presented him with a glass of milk. And that he took one sip of this glass of milk, and the effect of the poison had begun in his body. They describe the heat that the poison caused in the body of Imam Hasan was such that he wandered around his entire house looking for relief until he could find no relief from the heat of this poison, and he fell on his bed. They said my Imam suffered the effect of this poison for 40 days. My Madloom Imam suffered with this poison in his body that would cut up his liver and his flesh inside, that he would throw up his flesh and blood. The description comes at this, that when the time started to come close of the end of his life, he called Imam Hussein to him, and the weakness had become such that Imam could not raise off of the bed. When he felt again the blood coming out of him, he said, Oh Hussein, bring to me the tasht I have put on the side. A tasht is a wide basin dish. Imam Hussein brings this dish. Imam Hasan begins to vomit his blood and his insides come out. They describe that so much came out of him that the sides of his mouth had been colored red by his own blood. Imam Hussein, upon hearing someone at the door, Imam Hasan says, Oh Hussein, cover this tray. There is someone coming to the door. Lest it is our sister Zainab, it would be painful for her to see this blood from me. The sister of Imam Hasan enters. When she enters, she immediately looks around the room. She is the sister of Hasan and Hussein. She is the knower of the secrets of her brothers. She is the one who has been honored as the keeper of the kafan that was sent from heaven. She immediately looks in the room and she finds this covered tray and she uncovers it. Oh my brother, what is your condition? The poets in this moment recite, and they say there is poetry of Sayyidah Zainab that deserves honor. They says that she is the only one who can call out, I am the knower of the two tasht, of the two trays, one that had the liver of my brother in it, and one that had the head of my brother in it. I am the keeper of the two arrows, one in the eye of Abbas, one in the liver of Hussein. I am the keeper of the two heads, that of my father that was split in the mihrab, and that of my brother Hussein that was raised on the spear. I am the keeper of the two fires, one that was lit on the door of my mother, and that one that was lit on the tents of my brother. Sayyidah Zainab has every right that she should weep over the difficulties presented, but today is the night of Imam Hasan, where it said that this poison that affected his body was such that he died in a state of extreme pain and difficulty. When his final time came, it was Abu Abdullah who hugged his brother to his chest and began to cry. And Abu Abdullah is asked by Imam Hasan, brother, why do you cry? He says, oh Hasan, I see you in such a condition. I have nothing to do but to hug you to my chest. Imam Hasan says, oh Hussein, who will hug you to their chest? Imam Hasan was turned green by a poison. Imam Hasan says, oh Hussein, I may have been turned green, but oh Hussein, you will be the one turned red in your own blood. These are the two sons of Zahra. Upon this is the Shahadat of Imam Hasan. It is narrated that one of the honors of Sayyidah Zainab is that she was the keeper of the Akfan of Jannah. Remember when Sayyidah Khadija became Shaheed, when she died, Rasulullah cried and complained that I have not even cloth to bury my Khadija. Allah sent 5 kafan from heaven. The first of whom was given to Sayyidah Khadija, the second was narrated for Rasulullah, the third for Imam Ali, the third for Sayyidah Zahra, the fourth for Imam Ali, the fifth for Imam Hasan. Rasulullah in this moment asked Jibreel, but I have another son. What of my Hussein? Ya Rasulullah, قتله غريبا أنشانا. Your Hussein will be killed alone, will be killed a stranger. He will not be given a kafan. He will be left under the open sky. The time now has come for Imam Hasan that the final kafan was presented. Imam Hussein asked, "Oh, Sister Zainab, give to me that kafan." I imagine that Sayyidah Zainab said, "Oh, Baya, what about you? What is your condition?" But the honor of Imam Hasan was given that he was buried. But the difference between these two brothers, it's true, oh Imam Hasan, you wept over Abu Abdullah. You cried that he would be left alone. You left a sacrifice to take your place in Karbala. You gave your Qasim, you gave your children. But oh my Imam, today the dome of Abu Abdullah is open. We go and we say our salam. We sit by him. We remember his mother Fatima. Hi, my Mazlum Imam Hasan. Is there no one to go to him? Is he still imprisoned alone? Are they still abusing him too today? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Ya Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to the marhumin and all those in need of dua. Ya Allah, we have come with hajat. By the right of the mention of Imam al-Mujtaba, fulfill the hajat of the mu'mineen. Ya Allah, we are here. If there are those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness, Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, there are those mu'mineen around this world who are suffering through insecurity and difficulty, whether in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bahrain, and all the other areas of the world. Ya Allah, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, keep us and our children on the upright path of Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us from his upright supporters. Ya Allah, entitle us to Shafa of Abu Abdullah in dunya and in akhirah. Matem Hussein.
حسن مسموم آتا جنازہ ہے یہ پیٹو سرہرے ازا آتا ہے تابوت سے زوجہ ملعون نے زہر ہلا ہل دیا زہر سے مارا گیا آتا جنازہ ہے یہ ملونا ملعون چیروں کی بارش کیا چیروں سے سیدھا گیا آتا جنازہ ہے یہ فوج ملک ساتھ ہے سر کھلے جبریل ہے شور یہی ہے بپا آتا جنازہ ہے یہ کیسی سی زینب خستن بائی حسن بائی حسن کیسی سی زینب خستن بائی حسن بائی حسن دیکھو میرا رنجو مہن بائی حسن بائی حسن کیسی سی زینب خستن بائی حسن بائی حسن کیسی سی زینب خستن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن تم ہوئے ہم سے جدا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے حسن تم ہوئے ہم سے جدا اے میرے بھائی حسن فاطمہ کے لاڈلے جوش نبی پر چڑھے فاطمہ کے لاڈلے جوش نبی پر چڑھے تم پہ یہ ظلم و جفا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن تم ہوئے ہم سے جدا اے میرے بھائی حسن زہر ستم سے ہوا ٹکڑے جگر آپ کا زہر ستم سے ہوا ٹکڑے جگر آپ کا سبز بدن ہو گیا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن تم ہوئے ہم سے جدا اے میرے بھائی حسن اٹھ کے تو دیکھ ذرا آپ کا قاسم کھڑا اٹھ کے تو دیکھو ذرا آپ کا قاسم کھڑا روتا ہے سر پیٹتا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن وہی تم سے اے میرے بھائی حسن آج یہ صدمہ سہا اے میرے بھائی حسن آہ یہ صدمہ سگا اے میرے بھائی حسن غم سے یہ گلا گھٹ گیا اے میرے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے بھائی حسن کیسی سی زینب بکا اے میرے بھائی حسن تم ہوئے ہم سے جدا اے میرے بھائی على رسول الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون سورة المباركة الفاتحة
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المأسومين من ذريتك، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك، وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك، وظهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Inshallah, everything goes well, man. Like, I saw the glasses, I knew what was going on. I was like, I know you're not putting it on for fun.